This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Ben Settle, compulsively punchable.
He's the kind of guy who you'd probably just punch on the arm really hard if you ever met him.
Worshipped by feminists.
He pokes fun at feminism and women, just joking around, his whole sandwich making thing.
Mildly inspiring.
Yes, I recommend the Ben Settle Show, and anybody who isn't on it, that's their own loss.
Somewhat authentic.
Ben is a very distinct personality. There's no fluff. I can't stand fluff.
Syrupy sweet.
Tells it like it is, and sometimes may not be the most polite manner, shall we say.
Kind of useful.
So I have spent tens of thousands of dollars on coaching and masterminds, and I've learned more from Ben Settle's podcast than from any of that.
Semi-intelligent.
Ben sounds like a crazy guy at times, but he's one of the smartest individuals in marketing I've ever met.
Mostly forgettable.
He's always in the forefront of my mind.
The BenSettle.com podcast begins now.
This is Ben Settle, the BenSettle.com podcast. So I had this urge for a long time to do something that would hopefully rattle the millennials who listen to this show. Now, it's not to personally rattle them like to make it personal, because the ones who listen to this show are not the ones I'm talking about when I make fun of millennials. The ones that listen to this show are more mature and wiser and smarter. And at least I expect them to be. I mean, I'm sure there's always a few bad apples that get in, but so it is. So a few years back, I wrote this email about why Generation X makes the best entrepreneurs. Now, Generation X, depending on what source you're looking at, is like anything from the 1960s up until like 1981, if you were born during that time. Like, apparently Obama's Gen X. I didn't know that. That kind of disappoints me, actually, a little bit. But whatever. This is Generation X. Jonathan, may I ask your age, or is this off limits? Are you going to be, are you touchy about that?
I think that you and I might be the same age after something you said a couple episodes ago, but I'm 40 this year.
Okay, so you're still young. At the time of this, I should be 42. Okay, depending on what, I'm guessing this is late July or August when this is being aired. So I'm 42. So I'm still your elder, and you will do as I say as a result. Okay?
Yes.
But
yes, sir. Yes, seafood.
But yeah, you're Generation X. So I'm going to be interested to hear your reactions to it. Now, I assume you will agree with everything because, not only because you're Gen X, but because you're wise and all that. But, I would be interesting to gauge your reaction to these things that I'm about to say in light of what you think millennials and baby boomers will think.
Oh.
Because well, that's the thing. This isn't an anti-baby boomer, anti-millennial thing. Or Gen Text. I don't even know what the new generations.
They're known as them. They don't have a
them. They're just like, they're lucky to even been born in this pro-abortion world. So just be happy. But but it's not anti anybody. It's just pro us. It's just elevating us above them. Doesn't make them bad people. It just makes us better. And I hope that's clear. I hope that Context Kings understand that. I'm not saying you're bad. I'm just saying I'm better. Now, is there anything wrong with that? Am I overstepping some bounds here, Jonathan? I mean, I think I'm being quite kind when I say that because, I am kind. I'm a kind and benevolent dictator. And so it is. and I mean benevolent spelled with a capital B-E-N. Benevolent. So here's some attributes that we have. And I believe this is why this makes us really good entrepreneurs today. It didn't always make us really good entrepreneurs, but I think as of now, especially now that the millennials have come into their own and all that, and we can kind of judge everybody, because I like judging people, and I have no problem judging them, or the baby boomers, or myself for that matter. The one thing, and this isn't going to apply to every Gen Xer, but as a generation, we were called the latchkey generation. I was a latchkey. I don't know about you, Jonathan. You probably come from a family that's intact. But I came from a divorced family. My mom was a waitress as I was growing up. I was often shunted off to babysitters and that sort of thing. When I got older, like in middle school, I was able to just come home and be by myself. I didn't have to go to a stupid babysitter or anything. And the latch key is like, okay, I went and found the key and let myself in because nobody was home. And that was a lot of my friends too. Were the same way, at least where I grew up. We were the latchkey generation. So what does this mean? Well, it means that we learned how to fend for ourselves at an early age. You know, I mean, I remember I was making my own dinners and stuff. Not from scratch. I mean, my mom would kind of get it made up, but then I'd have to like do some work. You know, I'd have to cook it and all that stuff. And then when we got a microwave, it got easier. Because this is back when not everyone had a microwave. This is back, Jonathan. This was back when we didn't have cable TV. Couldn't afford it. It was too expensive back then. On a waitress's salary or, you know, on tips, just, you know, you're lucky to have anything. And had to fend for ourselves. And I think that attribute does well for me later now. Like, I don't rely on like people the way that I see, for example, millennials relying on people. I have people in place. It's not a team, but I mean, I have certain people in place doing things. But for example, if one of them up and quit on me or something, I would be able to kind of figure it out for myself until I could replace them. It wouldn't just like kill my business. And I'm guessing you're the same way. Like, for example, in the podcast factory, if the guy who does your audio stuff, if he decided to tell you to go screw off, you would be able to fend for yourself in the short term. You'd be able to, you know enough about this stuff to do it and get something up. It may not be the best quality podcast, but you would be able to do something. Am I right or wrong? I mean, you at least know the basics of what needs to be done.
You're right. And to add to that, we've built redundancy. So we have multiple teams. So I wouldn't really be touching it, but if I had to, I could.
Yeah, and which is smart. And I'm guessing you've built redundancies because you know, as someone who's had to fend for yourself. And I don't know, were your parents married or what's your situation? What are they divorced, married, what?
No, my parents were married for until my mom died. So they were married like 35 years. But it's weird because I grew up like that. They were both working. My mom worked a couple jobs. Dad worked late. And I had to take care of my brother. I've got a little sister. She's 9 years old. And I can't trust her with Dong. And I'm like, how the hell was I taking care of my little brother when I was 9 and he was 5? It's crazy.
Well, it's a good point because back in the 80s, which is when we were growing up, basically, it was both parents, that's when everyone started having to work all the time. And, you know, we can go into the politics of this, like the Immigration Act of 1965. You know, when you have too many workers in a system, wages go down, which means you have to have two people working to make the same income you would normally. And, you know, I could go on a whole rant about that, but this is not a political show, Jonathan.
Are you sure?
I know a lot of people that would love to have that argument with me. I'm like you know, I'm all about closing walls and borders and all that. I'm all about that. I'm doing it in Obembo's lair. I have closed immigration, has been closed. The wall is up and it's paid for by the tears of those who are begging to be let back in. Okay. So, but that's what it was in the 80s. That's exactly how it was. In fact, even the movies of the time. Like, for example, I was recently watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And both parents, one was like, the father's working in the city as some, I don't know, executive. The mom's a real estate agent. Think of the Huxtables, you know, the Cosby Show, same thing. And that was normal, though, to have two parents working and all that. And so it is. They just, you know, we had to fend for ourselves. Another attribute we have, and this kind of piggybacks off the last one, is I have noticed, and again, this does not mean everyone in Gen X has this, and it doesn't mean there aren't any in the other generations, but as a whole, I think we have a very strong work ethic. And I think one of the reasons why is not just because we saw our parents working their asses off, although that is one reason, but because especially during the 80s, you know, people were getting fired all the time. My parents were fired and rehired. I mean, it was crazy during the 80s. It was like that in the 70s too, you know, when they were having problems. But that makes you realize there is no real job security. I don't know anybody could have grown up in the 70s and the 80s especially and think there's any such thing as job security. I just don't. I don't understand it. There is no job security. When Robert Kiyosaki came out with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he really did a huge service for everyone bringing this out into the mainstream, that the old model is dead. It does not exist anymore. Go to school, get a secure job, and then you'll stay there for 40 years and you get a retirement. It doesn't happen anymore. Maybe it happens if you're a government worker and you're living off the teat of the taxpayer, but it doesn't for us regular people.
Get off my teats.
Get off my teeth. Quit sucking on my teeth.
Those teeth hurt.
And there's also this, like, I noted that, you know, at least I can only say this is the case for me. It's the case for all my people I know are in Gen X. We just have this like arrogant elitist attitude that, no one's going to do it for you. Like whatever it is you want, you really can't trust politicians. Now, I'm not going to say everyone I know. There are some people I know who actually still think the government is, you know, Santa Claus and all that. But I'm talking about business people. They know that no one's going to do it for you. You can't rely on the government to do this stuff for you. And even if they did something for you that you should be doing for yourself, they can't do it as good as you would do it. So we kind of have this like sense of like, we're going to get this done and we're going to get it done right. Now, some people would say that holds us back because we're kind of like perfectionists, right? And to a degree, they're right. Like, I'll grant that the millennials are a little bit different on that. I think that's a strength they have, is that they don't care about perfection. And it shows, right? It shows in a lot of the stuff they do. but if good enough there's something to be said for good enough. I will say that. Another attribute, Sir Jonathan of Castle Rivera, is, I don't know about you. I know this is the case with you because it's the case with me. I didn't grow up with an internet.
What?
The internet didn't even I was a senior in high school basically when the first commercial-based browser was launched. I believe 1993 was that. Whatever year that was. It was 93 or 94, 92 or something. So I didn't grow up with an iPhone in my hand. I didn't grow up. I remember I had to use a typewriter to write my papers. A typewriter, and I had to use that stupid white strip to, if I made a mistake, I'd have to type over it with that white strip and all. It was a pain. I mean, we have it so easy now at word processing. It's amazing to me. I can just write really fast and I don't have to worry about mistakes because I can just go back and delete and all that, and I don't have to mess with the typewriter. I remember writing, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but when I did my papers for in college and all that, research papers, the way you did it wasn't go to the internet to do your research. It was go to the library and start reading actual books.
Dewey Decimal System, remember?
I had to use the Dewey Decimal System. I absolutely did. And I used note cards to organize my thoughts. It's not like you had laptops back then. Or if you did, they weren't, very well, they were expensive. I remember, Jonathan, talking about phones now, talking about no iPhone, no smartphones, whatever. I remember this was the peak of technology for me when I was high school, middle school. So back then, if you couldn't afford to call someone, you're at a payphone, you called them collect, which would mean that it would bill the person who answers the phone. They can accept the charge or not. So my mother, in her wisdom, gave me and my brother a 4-digit code that when you call collect, you call some number and you put in this code, and it's like calling collect automatically. So I didn't have to ask to call collect. I didn't have to do that. The operator didn't have to ask my mom. That was the pinnacle of phone technology. I guess there were pagers back then. I only had a pager very briefly in 1999 when I was working in the city of Chicago as a video production assistant, and which was basically like being a glorified waiter for clients. I mean, you didn't get to do a whole lot of video stuff. And I remember they gave me a pager, and I was expected to be on call 24/7. And even though I lived, 50 miles from the city, I don't know, it was just not cool. And because we didn't grow up with the internet, Jonathan, I believe that we get technology, we understand it, we use it. This is where the baby boomers sometimes have trouble. They have trouble with technology. We don't. And millennials obviously take to technology like a fish to water, so they don't have this problem. But we understand it enough to use it, but we're wise enough not to trust it. And I believe we're wise enough not to trust it because of movies like The Terminator and War Games from the 1980s. Okay. The warnings have been there for a very long time. And when we hear about things like AI, artificial intelligence, and robots taking over the world, which are making headlines more and more that they're becoming, they could technically be aggressive, it does not surprise us one bit. So we like technology, we use it, but we don't trust it, which is probably why guys like you and I still use print newsletters. So with print newsletters, the technology of direct mail has not changed in 100 and whatever years. But all this other technology always does. I like reliable, personally. I like technology, but I like reliable technology. Another attribute we have is we're not afraid to get our hands dirty. So I mentioned having to use a typewriter and had to go to the actual library to do research and look through the Dewey Decimal System to find the book. And, you'd spend hours doing stuff. Compared to today, people who grew up with the internet, they can just cut and paste everything off the internet, including entire research papers if they want. I mean, I hear it's pretty rampant these days, actually. I think that makes us a much smarter, certainly smarter than the millennials, better, I should say more critical thinkers, better critical thinkers, if nothing else. Not so much more than baby boomers, because they even had it harder. But, if you balance all these things together, I think that we are superior to the baby boomers. I've noticed that the millennials don't have as much attention to detail. And again, I know there's millennials listening to this saying, I have tremendous attention to detail. I'm not saying you personally, Mr. Millennial or Miss Millennial.
I didn't mean to trigger
As
you.
a whole, yes. Exactly. As a whole, you're people. Okay? I'm trying to make your people better with this. I can't do that if you take it personally. When you're one of the people I'm expecting to, light the torch and run with it on my behalf to your people. Because they're not listening to me. You are, but they're not. I don't think they have a real desire to do the job right. It's all very I want to get out of job and I want to get out of school and make $80,000 a year right out of school. That's the expectation. It's not going to, I deserve it. I got a medal. I got rewards, man, when I was in school for everything. I don't know.
The generation of everybody got a trophy, right?
Everyone gets a trophy. And, self-esteem. When these people, there's a problem, Jonathan, when they literally had colleges have a day off when Trump was elected. Are you freaking kidding me? Are they really that weak? Or is this, are they
pussies.
Really? It's just amazing to me. Like that, that wasn't even fathomable when I was in school. Now, I'm not going to give you that I walked in snow up to my chest speech that the baby boomers like to tell when they didn't do any of that either. They had more school snow days because the buses couldn't drive around very much any better. So I don't want to hear about it. But I don't think that the millennials really, I don't think they pay a lot of attention to detail as a whole. I don't think that they really care about doing the best job. It's just like, it's all about me. And I don't think as a result, I don't think they take as much joy in earning things. I think the joy in when the victory is worth the battle, right? It's always worth it in the victory. But if you don't really have a battle, what are you victorious in? So I'll let people think on that for a while. And finally, I believe we make better email marketers because, again, we understand email. I didn't even send my first email until 1996, Jonathan. I was my third year in college is when I first actually used it. And we understand it, we use it, but we don't rely on it because we didn't grow up with it. And I wouldn't say just email, but all this technology, we didn't rely on it. You and I would get by just fine if cellular towers all went down. Because we know, I'm guessing you have a landline phone. You may not have a landline, but you probably have a landline phone that you could use. And, so it is. So those are some reasons, those are some traits, some attributes that Gen X has that the others don't necessarily have. And we have them all, and the other ones don't have them all. And this is why we are superior to you. Okay? Now, I know you're listening. I know there's baby boomers listening to this. Hey, little punk, just shut up and listen to what I said. Understand it. Take the medicine. Take your old ass to the
Geritol.
Take your old ass to the medicine cabinet and take some medicine. That's what this is. And for you millennials, just shut the hell up and listen and do as you're told. You're good at doing that. You're good little drones. I mean, the school system has taught you to be one. Now be a good drone for what I'm teaching you. And I'll teach you to not be a drone. I'll teach you to be better than a drone. And everyone just listen to me and do as I say, and all of our generations will get along fine in peace and happiness and harmony. And I'm sure that's what they're all thinking right now.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly it.
I have no idea what next week will behold, but until then, I bid you all a fond farewell.
Hasta la bye-bye. We'll catch you on the next one.
You've been listening to the bensettle.com podcast. To get your hands on a free issue of Ben Settle's prestigious $97 per month email player's newsletter, simply go to www.bensettle.com.
This is the podcastfactory.com.